Welcome, everybody. Today is Friday, August 29th. We are the District 1 Environmental Commission. Meeting to conduct a hearing on application 1R0156-6 filed by the applicant 86 Squier Road LLC. The application is seeking authorization for a project generally described as redevelopment and auto dealership property. More specifically, the project proposes the demolition of the main building, construction of new dealership building, renovation of existing smaller buildings, and associated site improvements, stormwater infrastructure, landscaping, lighting, parking, walkways, and utilities. My name is John Casella. I'm the District 1 Environmental Commission Chair, and I'm joined by fellow commissioners Devin Fuller and Thomas Acker. In accordance with 1 VSA 312 Vermont's open meeting law, I confirm that we've taken the following steps. We are providing public access to the meeting by online video conference, additional access offices. We're using the Microsoft Teams platform for hybrid meetings. All members of the commission have the ability to communicate during this meeting, and the public has access to listen and if desired to participate in the meeting by attending in person, downloading the Microsoft Teams application, or by calling in to the toll-free number provided in the meeting notice. In addition, we have provided public notice and instructions for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing this, including how to access the meeting using telephone or Microsoft Teams in our meeting notice. That document included those instructions has also been provided to the meeting in the meeting notice on the access meeting online. Some housekeeping items, meeting subject to the meeting law. By participating, you're consenting to being audio and visually recorded, and for that record to be published on the board's online database or be aware the microphones are sensitive. They will pick up whispering, high conversation. So if they do, it will be on the public record. So take note of that. Any written information or exhibits provided to the commission or Act 250 staff regarding official state business are considered public records and will become part of the permanent record to be published in. If you'd like to speak during the meeting, just a hearing, please raise your hand and wait to be addressed by the chair. Everyone will have a chance to present their evidence and respond to the meeting. We do have to use the remote, so the chat function has been disabled for this Teams meeting. This hearing is being recorded, including meeting places and marking off. So on Teams, please mute until you would like to speak. If you are participating online via Teams and would like to speak during the hearing, please use the raise hand feature, which is located in the toolbar in the top center of your screen. If you're participating exclusively by telephone, press *6 to unmute and speak up so we can hear you. Finally, please do not log into the Microsoft Teams meeting on your computer or other device and participate on your phone at the same time, because it will cause very distracting audio feedback disruption. For the purpose of today's meeting, we as the commission are charged with collecting evidence as to whether this project meets the requirements of Act 250. Based upon the evidence, we will decide to issue or deny the permit if applied for. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call of attendance for all persons participating in the meeting. If there's anyone here in the room that has not signed in yet, I'd like to do now. I think we've got everybody. So we'll start with those in the room. If we could just go one through, please just state your name and affiliation.
Tanner Romano, Hiller Breen, contractor.
Michael Fleming, Super New England applicant.
Tim Toomey, Super New England applicant.
Chad Brannon, Fieldstone Land Consultant, civil engineer.
Thank you.
John McKenna, Chair of Clarendon Planning Commission. Edwin Clark, NBF Architects, working for New England.
Gloria Bedard, Clarendon Town.
have everybody in person.
Yeah, and then so, the folks online, we will unmute you one at a time just so you can introduce yourself and either your association or just state your interest in attending today. So bear with us while we do this, check with that. No, let Mike. So Catherine, you should be able to unmute yourself now. If you could do that and just introduce yourself. Yep, Catherine, actually go back to Kim and see, it looks like she actually can't unmute. Allow Mike up. Yeah, that's good. Sorry, Catherine. Oh, so now you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Catherine Weber. I'm an administrative assistant for Subaru of New England.
Great, thank you. And then Jose? You should be able to unmute yourself. Well, yeah, he, the way the icon is that you should be able to. Are you able to unmute yourself, at the top ribbon of the screen? There should be a mic icon that you can click. Able to mic. So yeah, we'll move on right now and again, I'll try to, Jose, if you have access to, the, meeting notice, it's probably how you access the meeting. And if you could email one of the email addresses in there, give us your contact information, that would be helpful. If you want your attendance recorded or to participate. That's all we can do right now.
I can send it to you too, if that's easier.
Okay, so with your team.
Yeah, so Jose Oliver, it's Oliver Subaru.
Oh, okay,
He's,
okay,
he's the owner of all the Subaru.
okay, sounds good.
So hopefully you guys do a good enough job and you don't have to talk.
Exactly. I like that thinking, John. I like that, John.
Can you call to throw them on speaker on your phone?
Yeah, can we do that?
So allow my, yeah. And then to unmute yourself,
Or six.
yeah, to unmute yourself on the phone.
Can
hit
you guys
star
hear me
six.
now?
Yeah,
Yep.
So Jose Oliver, I'm the owner of Oliver Subaru, and sorry I couldn't be there, but I had a meeting in Vegas that I'm participating in. But I wanted to make sure that I joined in either phone or Zoom. My computer's not working, but then again, I'm not super computer literate. But that's who I am.
Thank you.
yeah, Yeah, if you just want to mute yourself again, and there for the time being, and then either way, it should, the control thing, you will make sure. Okay. I think we can move on. Thank you, everyone.
Is that it?
Yep. you.
Participants are reminded that all people requesting party status and any other person who would like to continue to receive documentation associated with this proceeding must provide us with an email address or mailing address. If you haven't already done so, please email the district office, describe your interest in the proceeding, and provide your full name and contact information. If you can find an email address for the district office in the official notice of this hearing. Conflict of interest disclosure, the commissioners have reviewed all the materials submitted with this application, in part with an eye towards identifying any conflicts of interest that the commissioner might have. We're not aware of any conflicts of interest that need to be disclosed with this time. Ex parte communication outside of today's proceedings. May I remind everyone that all communication, whether by letter, email, telephone, or persons, must flow through the district coordinator when manned and not through other parties or commission members. Quick overview of the hearing process. The commission's charge is collecting evidence as to whether this project meets the requirements of Act 250, and based upon that evidence, decide to issue or deny the permit applied for. You may want to participate in these proceedings as a party. Party status is important for two reasons. First, the party may introduce evidence, bring in experts or other witnesses to testify and take part in the argument. Second, you may be unhappy with our ultimate decision, and only a party may appeal our decision to the environmental court. The applicant will present the project in brief, then the commission will consider requests from individuals or organizations, groups seeking party status or other participation rights, and determine under which criteria they may be preliminarily admitted. Parties will have an opportunity to testify in order to introduce evidence they would like to enter into the record. When you speak, please state your name for the record. Does anybody have any questions at this point in the process? Now I'm going to ask everyone who thinks they might address the commission during this hearing to swear or affirm that they will tell the truth. Accordingly, anyone who expects to address us, please raise your right hand. I'd like to have each of you just restate your name for the record and your affiliation.
I'm Chad Brandon, civil engineer and principal owner of the Fieldstone Land Consultants.
Tim Toohey, construction manager of Subaru New England.
Michael Fleming, Subaru New England.
Tanner Romano on the other breed.
John McKenna, planning commission. Edward Clark, can be a architect.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand.
And Jose might speak too. Correct. Okay, so again, your mic's allowed again, Jose, so just when we do the swearing in, make sure you chime in with your IQ as well. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony or evidence that you shall provide relative to the consideration of this application shall be truthful, accurate, and complete under the pains and penalties of perjury? If so, answer I do.
I do.
So now ask the applicant to give us a brief overview of the project. After that, we'll consider petitions from any individuals or organizations, organized groups seeking party status or other participation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Chad Brandon. I'm a civil engineer and principal owner of the Fieldstone Land Consultants, representing Subaru of New England and 86 Squier Road LLC for today's hearing. With me from Subaru of New England and Squier Road LLC is Michael Fleming, who is the Vice President of the company, and Tim Toomey, who's the construction manager. We are before you today to talk about a redevelopment of the subject property, which is located off of Squier Road. And the purpose of that redevelopment is to provide a space for Oliver Subaru in the Rutland dealership to relocate to this site, hopefully. The subject property consists of 14.161 acres of land and has frontage along US Route 7 to the east and Squier Road to the south. Nearly 40 years ago, this property was developed, permitted and developed into the dealership that's there today. Certainly, I think the dealership use on the property dates back to 1970, so that's nearly 50 years, if I recall correctly. The current dealership on site consists of about 28,000 square feet of building, over 2 buildings. So we have essentially a 22,000 square foot main dealership building, and then a 6,000 square foot secondary building situated on the south side of the site. The development favors US Route 7 due to significant site constraints. Although there is 14.1 acres of land, the western portion of the site does have a pretty significant jurisdictional wetland that runs through the property in a north-south orientation. The permitting nearly 40 years ago was significantly different to today's standards, and we'll talk about that a lot, through our presentation and testimony today as it relates to, why we're looking to make changes to the site and such. Many of those standards are not just building related. From a building standpoint, we have ADA compliance standards that have definitely changed over that time period. There's energy standards, buildings, typical building code items. But there's also site conditions and permitting conditions that have changed quite significantly over the last, 40 years. Those consist of stormwater management standards. There's a non-compliant well on site. So there's, those standards, have changed or been a little bit more stringent. The septic system that's currently on site, or actually that currently services the sites, it's situated off-site on the adjacent golf course. Doesn't meet all of today's, standards. There's a floor drain in the existing automotive, service area that doesn't meet today's standards. So there's a large effort to revisit, in a requirement, frankly, as we permit a project in the state of Vermont, to revisit all of these items and make a compliant project. So by default, we have to, take a look at the site holistically and ultimately address some of those permit conditions that, were assigned to this project back 40 or so years ago. This project started, with us close to 2 years ago now, where we were evaluating, site conditions, and the initial attempt was to utilize both structures on site and maybe, propose an addition off the existing dealership. But unfortunately, what we found, and my client found, is that the existing structure is in severe disrepair. There's water issues in the basement level. There's mold issues. There's structural issues. There's drainage issues with the building really around its perimeter. And through a comprehensive evaluation, it was determined that we really had to step away from this building with the current proposal. And so we migrated in that direction. And so what's being proposed now is a new building. The new building is 24,357 square feet in size, the main dealership building. It will be situated slightly further back from, US Route 7. But it's modestly larger than the existing building, which is again around 22,000 square feet. So we're looking at about a 2,300 square foot increase in size of the building. In 40 years, auto dealerships have changed quite significantly. How they operate internally has changed, and ultimately, what we're proposing is a modern dealership layout that provides adequate, service bay and service, components to provide a good service for the community. And so that extra space is needed. As part of the project, we would reuse and ultimately renovate the second building, the 6,025 square foot building, which is situated along the southern portion of the site. The site conditions that we're proposing, in our opinion, offers significant improvements for a number of conditions, practical elements as well as technical elements. For example, the truck and emergency vehicular access will be substantially improved for this site. Currently, the existing building actually has roofline projections over a narrow access way along the US Route 7 side of the project. What we're proposing is a through loop access that will allow substantial access for deliveries, but also adequate access for emergency response vehicles, not only around the site, but around the building. And that was a component that we have reviewed locally when we secured the local approvals. We are also incorporating appropriate ADA parking spaces. We've completed a overhaul for the stormwater design for this project. When we initially met with the state of Vermont and the stormwater department, we found that this project is, has over 3 acres of existing impervious surface. So we fall into the 3 acre rule, where the objective and the directive really is to do the best you can to treat all of the stormwater. We're in the Lake Champlain watershed basin, and there is a clear intent to improve the stormwater conditions. Currently, the site has 0 stormwater mitigation. Again, the component that is substantially changed over the last 40 years. And so a holistic look at this project, just from the standpoint of the stormwater management, really requires land alteration, regrading, capturing, conveying, and treating the qualitative and quantitative aspects of those stormwater components. And our plan details all of those components, and we're happy to walk through that design and touch on why we had to make some of these modifications. One of the more critical parts of this project is along the US Route 7 side, where we had a number of permit conditions pertaining to maintaining landscaping, not cutting trees and things of that nature. That was actually an area of the site that we had a challenge in capturing the stormwater runoff. And so we had to alter that area and regrade that area in order to accomplish, that task. But we've also incorporated some mitigation measures into that we look forward to touching on and reviewing with the commission this morning. As part of the project, we've also had to incorporate a new community well. Unfortunately, we found, as we were into the project, that the existing well was not sealed, crowded, to the bedrock, and so as such, it didn't meet the community water standards. And so we've drilled a new community well on site, and I do believe that we actually obtained the signed permit for that today. And so that was a significant change that we had to, in an upgrade, meeting again, current standards. So we had to find a location that's appropriate, kind of design the site accordingly. And then circling back on the subsurface septic system that we have for this project, it's quite unique. Right now, the septic for the site is on the adjacent golf course property. And what that means is essentially all the effluent runs gravity to tanks on the exterior of the site. It goes to a pump chamber that's actually in the wetlands buffer on the western portion of the property. And then there's a 2-inch force main that is under the wetlands and goes over to the adjacent site. And so my client, felt pretty strongly that we had to address that because maintenance and upkeep for that is, would be a real problem. And quite honestly, it doesn't really commingle with today's, permitting standards, 40 years down the road. I think we would have a hard time getting that permitted under today's regulations. So we have submitted and we're close to obtaining approval for the subsurface system on this site. Part of the improvements also includes a collection system for the floor drains that are inside the service areas. Currently, the floor drains drain to a sand filter that is located in the wetlands buffer. And now back 40 years ago, the wetlands buffer didn't exist either. And so as these regulations kind of overlap, it really requires, as I stated before, a holistic look at, what are we doing? How are we accomplishing them? And what's best for the site, the community, and the environment. And we really feel strongly that we've taken a good approach on that, and we hope we can articulate that today in, our presentation. So the other piece that's changed quite substantially over the last 40 years is the automotive industry. In fact, I think, from my experience, it's changed quite significantly since COVID, which really wasn't that long ago. But business operations have adjusted because of supply and demand and how people get parts and how many vehicles you have for inventory and things of that nature. And so, we're trying to balance with this project the needs of a modern dealership on this site as well. A dealership that will ultimately provide a service, a good service, and I think Oliver Subaru has proved that, a great service to the community that they reside in. And so, we want to touch on some of those elements, but this plan and the plan that we have before you doesn't even meet all of those standards because we have to work around the existing constraints on site and try to balance in the mitigation components. So we're not showing the recommended minimum parking spaces. We're not showing some of those details here. Typically, an auto dealership building would actually be situated further back on the site, and we'd have more parking front loaded. But we didn't take that approach with this project because we have tried to work with the existing permits as well as the existing conditions that we do think were critical to those permits being issued in the past. So ultimately, through the permitting of this project to date, we have made significant improvements to the site, we believe, and we hope that we can articulate that. And it is it's our opinion that this project will have, if we're successful before the commission, positive impacts on the community and the environment. And what I want to touch on, because a lot of the revisions that we've been making, kind of down this final stretch have been, thanks to A&R staff and especially Quinn, really dedicating a lot of time to educating us on this project and on some of the regulations that have changed since this property received its approval, 40 or so years ago. And what I mean by that primarily is, and I think she left a lot of hints along the way, but it took us a while to kind of catch it. And when we looked at the permitting for this project, it doesn't say anything about strip development in it. And so if it didn't address, in our minds, if it didn't address it in the permit, then we must not be strict development. Well, we clearly missed we missed that window. But luckily, we were able to capture it and hopefully address, some mitigating components here in the last, week to present to the commission. And so we really want to thank, Gwen for her time, because she really has been a valuable resource and has really collaborated with us to try to make our plan better. And we hope we haven't worn her out too much along the way. So that's a kind of a high level presentation of the project, but I'm happy to go into the Stowe Club Highlands evaluation or any of the criteria A's for the 9L. I just don't know if you want me to stop and maybe try to answer any questions at this time.
That's a great overview. We'll now move on to party status requests, and then we'll start getting into the flow of the hearing. So it was excellent. Any questions, commissioners, on the overview? Great. So I'd like to ask if anybody is requesting party status in regards to this application. Excellent. Pretty good. So we'll get started into the merits of the hearing. And our intent as commission is to narrow the scope of today's hearing to the criteria that we believe are most applicable, and that's criterion 8, aesthetics, and 9L, sediment patterns.
And John, I know we got these at the end of the day yesterday, but I think we'll also want to add transportation. Just because hopefully you guys all saw the agency of transportation minor item, but just address it while we're here. So we should be able to just touch on that at the end there. Yep.
We will also open up criterion 5, transportation. So the first section is the scope of Highlands analysis that you referenced. Applicant seeks to amend critical permit conditions. The finding of permit 1R0156-3 states, quote, the applicant has redesigned the project at the request of the commission to provide a greater mitigation of the impact of this project. Included in this mitigation were additional plantings, naturalized burns, retention of existing mature trees, removal of existing parking in front of the building, and other minor changes. While the commission believes that the size of the building and the expansiveness of the parking, which is visible through Route 7, creates an adverse impact in such a rural setting, it does not feel such impact is undue, since adequate mitigation measures will be taken. The commission will thus reluctantly make affirmative findings under this condition. Ideally, this project should have been located closer to the established developed areas of the Rutland area where such visual impacts are expected, end quote. The findings go on to list the conditions the commission included at that time that compromised adequate mitigation measures. No additional project signs shall be added to the project site, which are visible to Route 7. No vehicles shall be parked on any grass areas except for the 4 vehicles on the designated mounds in front of the project. No existing trees shall be cut on the project lands which are located more than 10 feet from any proposed parking areas shown on the approved site plan labeled Exhibit 43, or located more than 10 feet from any sewer line needed for the project. The permits shall take all necessary action to ensure that no light source or reflective surface is visible from a state or federal numbered highway. The project building shall be dark brown in color, including existing buildings on site. The trim shall be natural cedar or matching color. The permit shall and continually maintain the landscaping and plantings as shown on the approved plans labeled Exhibit 43. So therefore, the commission must conduct the Rule 34E analysis. Rule 34E analysis is the balancing test. So Rule 34E analysis is the balancing test determine whether or not the finality outweighs. We'll ask that, we'll begin by asking the applicant to confirm which of these conditions the applicant. I can read those, or you can state which specific condition.
So, we are, Mr. Chairman, looking to amend those conditions that you included, which pertain to no additional project lines looking at the site, which are visible from the study. I don't know if you want me to touch on the details here. We're not actually technically adding a sign. We're making the existing sign smaller, and we're putting letters on the building, but it's my understanding that letters on the building are considered a sign. So I think technically we need to request relief on this criteria because of that. But we are reducing the size of the sign out adjacent to US Route 7. And during the site walk, I made a statement. I just want to clarify and correct. The sign is going to be in the exact same location, is not moving any closer to the highway. So because of that, we are requesting modification to that condition. As it pertains to no existing trees shall be cut on project land which are located on the way and proposed paved area on the site plan. Because of the requirement of stormwater mitigation and management, we will be cutting trees for the stormwater area. We'll also be cutting some trees for the regrading to accomplish that. Initially, we were proposing to cut the mature vegetation along Route 7 associated with the project, but we've since, in one of the newer mitigation components that we want to present today, we are since proposing a modification to the layout along Route 7 where we would incorporate 7 landscape islands to break up the pavement, and we would transplant the mature trees in those islands. So that is detailed on the revised landscaping plan that I'd be happy to distribute to the commission when you feel that's appropriate.
Sorry, maybe we'll bring up again. And, we have to read some steps slash. Thank you, it's really can't do. Yep, and we're still recording and everything, so. Maybe do another test with Elaine if you're listening and can hear us. Unmute yourself and talk.
I can hear you now.
Okay, great, we can still hear you too. Thank you. Is that everyone back? Great. We'll get you back before we get to the meat of it.
All right, so we'll get started as Quinn described. We'll start getting into the analysis. That's the factors the commission must consider when balancing flexibility versus finality. So those factors, I think the easiest way to do it will be just hit each factor and then you can speak to any conditions that apply to that factor. And we'll just go down through the list and we can address each one. We'll see how that goes if we need to bounce around. And the first factor that needs to be considered of the 7 is changes in fact, laws and regulations beyond the permittee's control. So any items that you want to touch on that hit on that factor, changes in fact, operation or technology must be a driving force behind the amendments which permittees seek, not the other way around.
Yes.
As we start back with the first condition. No additional project signs. Is there anything related to changes in fact, law, regulations, and non-permitting control for that first condition?
So I would say that I think the answer is likely going to be yes on all the conditions, but just speaking specifically to the sign, component, we are actually making the sign compliant that exists, making it smaller. It's going to be a pylon sign, so there's changes in fact there. It's not, the sign in its location is not really the issue. It's the industry standard, the corporate standard now, where all dealerships have at least a logo and some letters on the face of the building. 40 years ago, that maybe wasn't a requirement. And so although we're technically adding a sign to the building, we're not adding a sign to the site as far as physically on site, meaning a separate like monument sign. So we think we technically meet the permit condition, but we don't want to assume that. We want to make sure that that's part of the consideration. And so I do think that's technically, a change in fact, that should be considered. Hopefully the commission will want to consider.
The trees, no existing trees shall be cut. Project lands, anything on that related to changes in fact, operation, technology?
Yeah, I think clearly the stormwater regulations are a change in that we have to contemplate. And the standards, when you have to have, nitrogen and phosphorus removal, you have to have a plant component. So it can't just be a subsurface, stormwater mitigation, based on soil properties on the site. It really has to be, like a gravel wetland or some kind of invasive, and that's what they recommend. The state recommended, I should say, particularly when we, consulted with them for this project.
Excellent, thank you.
And then just, you want me to keep moving down, Mr. Chairman? So the permittee shall take all necessary action to ensure no light source or reflector surface is visible from the state highway. I think on many levels we meet this, but we didn't when I think the evaluation was being done. And what I want to say to address that is we have since revised the site lighting plan for this project and basically reduced the levels by 50% to comply with or fall under the Chittenden County lighting design standards, which we understand is kind of a guiding document often for site lighting in commissions. And so we now meet those standards. And so the site lighting will be, fully, hidden, downcast, night sky compliant lighting. So I don't think that we would be addressing any of that, but certainly the plans that the commission has reviewed, we have new plans today to share. So anything to this point would require and merit this bullet, for being on there. I will say that our project, ideally we would have an internally, lit sign and internally lit letters on the building, but we are willing to, if that's something that the commission, doesn't want, then we are willing to do, external lighting or those elements. Moving down, the project building shall be dark brown in color, including existing buildings on site. The trim shall be natural cedar or matching color. And, we have a Subaru dealership that we're proposing here. Their colors are gray. There's no exception to that color, but what I will say is I feel like gray is a natural, earth tone type color. And so I don't think it's inconsistent with the conditions, that the commission at the time may have been seeking. But it is definitely a change. It's a factual change, a corporate standard change that hopefully the commission will consider. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, interestingly enough, I was educated on the fact that all of Subaru's dealerships has an accent tower that is slate, and it's a Vermont slate. And so it's a product actually, from Vermont that is, used everywhere. So that will be on, this building as well. And then, the last item is the permittee shall continually maintain the landscaping and plantings as shown on the approved plans labeled Exhibit 43. We are proposing changes to the site layout. And as such, and some of those changes are to address current standards for, design vehicles, emergency response, stormwater management, as well as, updating just automotive industry standards. But with that said, we have, quite honestly, the landscaping plan that was approved and in Exhibit 43 is not the landscaping that you see on site. The site is currently non-compliant. But what we've done is we've taken Exhibit 43, we've taken all of the landscaping that was proposed, and we are proposing greater landscaping on this project. And, and our intent here is to meet and exceed the landscaping threshold that was established with the original permit. On top of that, as I stated earlier, we modified our design, which had a linear pavement edge along the front to have 7 islands, where we'll be transplanting the trees that were successful since this permit 4 years ago. And those mature trees will be located in those islands. And so this project, if we're successful, we'll start off with mature landscaping. I think that'll be, a fantastic, aesthetic along the, the highway. We are maintaining the vegetation on portions of the north and south, and so it'll be infill mature vegetation in those islands. And so I think if you're traveling along Route 7, that section is actually 55 miles an hour. You could be stopping for the intersection at 103, but the reality is I think this plan hopefully speaks to, an appropriate mitigation where, it's going to blend, in a fantastic fashion. I do want to mention with the landscaping as well, the flagpole has been removed from the project. That's the only comment that V-Trans had. And so the criteria 5 was only related to the flagpole. For whatever reason, the rendering showed that out in front of the sign and just onto the state right of way. And so it was a very appropriate comment. We communicated with them after they sent the correspondence to the commission, and told them we were removing that. And that's the communication was, thank you, that would satisfy our concern. So I do want to just state that for the record as well.
Okay, we want to move on to the next factors. Other questions? Yeah, those ones? No, good. So the next factor is changes in technology, construction, or operations, which necessitate the amendment. And some of these will overlap, so you can certainly reference back, to previous testimony if it meets multiple conditions or factors.
And you want to go down through each one?
Yeah, if there's anything relevant that wasn't already previously addressed, it could be applied here as well.
Sure. So as it pertains to the signs, I think the comment would be quite similar that we're proposing a reduction in the sign in its current location, but we're adding the building signage, which would be, excuse me, really an industry change as it relates to the automotive industry. So I believe that would be considered an operations change. And that would necessitate, in our mind anyways, this amendment.
And anything related to the internally illuminated from a technology construction?
So, sure, we might want to agree on that, but that is right now we're just focusing on potentially revising the conditions, and then we're going to go on to the details of that, just to try to get through this.
Good call. Thank you.
Would you like me to move on, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
The second criteria was no existing trees shall be cut in the project lands. I won't read the whole bullet unless you feel it's necessary, but clearly we've articulated that the change in regulations really requires us to meet that holistically for the project, the stormwater regulations certainly, and then I believe access and ADA accessibility. There's just so many factors that kind of unfortunately lend to some tree removal, and then we can talk about details of those in different locations on the project, but certainly that criteria, the changes in operations, it's required as part of the regulations to change. We can't come in with an application and not address, the stormwater or the subsurface.
So from a construction standpoint, the removal of the trees in the front and kind of re-landscaping in order to get grading to collect the stormwater off the site, we need to grade that area.
Right, and I mean, we were on the site walk and maybe, but to explain it, the grade's high against the building. And so you have to lower the grade there, and that has a projection, towards the highway. That where you're consistently lowering, we actually raised the grade of the building some, but we're consistently lowering the grade because the landscaping on the highway side is even a little bit high. And what happens is currently they get a lot of puddling in the pavement area. So the water is not free draining. And then when you take a look at our responsibility is to capture and treat as much stormwater as possible, we have to contemplate the conveyance swale that runs along Route 7 down to the drainage basin. So we essentially set the grade of that swale and worked our way back, to the building in order to enable us to meet those standards. As it pertains to the lighting, the permittee shall take the necessary action to ensure that no light source or reflective surface is visible from the state or federal limit highway. We will be submitting, in a revised lighting plan that shows there's no light pollution. I think the fixtures certainly meet all the requirements, and then the levels, uniformity ratio, the candle, power, those levels fall within that Chittenden County recommended design standard. So I think we need that design. The changes in design, sorry. The project buildings shall be dark brown in color, including existing buildings within the site. This is the change in operations is where, we're a Subaru dealership. And so that's the standard. And we're bringing the snowman. And the last one is the permittee shall and continually maintain the landscape and plantings as shown on the approved plan. And again, that dovetails with the stormwater and that construction change that's required.
So we can move on to the next factor, other factors including innovative or alternative design which provide for more efficient or effective means to mitigate the impact addressed by the original permit.
So with this one, Mr. Chairman, we definitely believe we've created, the most efficient layout with this project, putting the building in the same location, situating it actually slightly further away from the highway, and then expanding the parking, primarily to the side and rear of the building. I guess, would you like me to just kind of walk through all the bullets again? I don't believe there's another layout that would be more efficient, for this site that contemplates all of the criteria or the criteria that we're trying to address. But I can hit on each one of them.
I don't think you need to unless there's anything that you haven't stated prior.
And just to provide a little bit more context, what this factor is looking at, because again, we're still in campus kind of looking at what the foods they're using and changing that is if there's a particular, no additional signage, right? Or are you mitigating signage in a more innovative way? I don't think so. So again, you don't have to hit all these chapters, but that's what you're comparing to. It's not like, is it innovative to today's standards? Are you changing that condition because there's a more innovative way to mitigate that concern now? So it's slightly different than just like being innovative today, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So again, I think you touched on most things, but I just wanted to provide that additional context.
Right, so I think the site lighting has been modified, so we're utilizing, obviously current technology there with efficient, energy efficiency and stuff. I think the lights that are out there currently are metal halide and, so there's definitely an improvement there. And so I think that's a better design. Just mentioned here. I think that's it for that one though.
Other important policy considerations include proposed amendments, furtherance of the goals and objectives of duly adopted municipal plans related to those.
So I'm not aware of any, municipal plans or objectives that would be more stringent than the state criteria that we've been designing to. Certainly, I will say that, the town and the community has been very helpful and supportive of the project to date. We obviously have secured and approved the approval, from the town, but I would say that, if we're talking about policies and considerations that just in general that have had an impact on this project, then definitely I would again bring up the stormwater regulations, building energy, regulations that have been incorporated into the new development plan, access, just engineering standards and regulations that we have to meet nowadays with NFPA requirements, building accessibility, things of that nature. Yeah, the loop, and then for 2 access points to the project makes the safer site because we have the loop road. And so I'm not aware of any significant, concerns that have been raised locally. I think we've addressed them, through the design and plan.
The next factor is manifest error on the part of the district commission, the environmental board, or the environmental court in issuance of the permit conditions.
We're not aware of any errors, in the permit. I mean, certainly there's strict conditions, but not technically errors. And so, we're trying to navigate, but I'm not aware of any errors and quite honestly, Quinn has helped us with that too, because there was some confusion in some of the labeling of the document records. It looked like, there was a modification of some of the tree clearing with the prior permit, but it wasn't supported by an internal, document. So we have looked through to make sure that we're creating, consistency. I think the biggest element here is no errors, but there's 40 years of time.
Yeah.
And so things do have to adjust for time typically.
Fair enough. The next factor is the degree of reliance on prior permit conditions or material representations of the applicant in prior proceedings by any party, the district commission, the environmental board, or the environmental court, or any other persons who has a particular interest protected by 10 VSA CH 151 that may be affected by the proposed amendment.
Yeah, as we've gone through all the permits, so we've now communicated with everybody. And nobody has raised the concern or issue with having to maintain certain components or details within the site. Everybody seems to be evaluating the project under today's regulations and trying to enforce today's standard. And so that's really where we've been left with a conflict. Where we meet, a design standard for subsurface, and we meet a stormwater, and we meet, the wells, and we meet all of these criteria along the way, and we have to revisit the conditions of a permit that's dated in a site that, quite honestly, is very dated and in disrepair. And so that's where I think hopefully we can have a really good dialogue relative to our design and how we'll live and include this area.
Great. And the last factor we need to consider is whether the applicant is merely seeking to relitigate the permit condition or to undermine its purpose and intent. Can you confirm that's not your intent?
Yeah, that is not our intent. We've tried to adjust the design to find balance with the intent, with the other regulations. And again, we hope the commission will see that in, our updated mitigation plan and, the updated lighting plan, and just things that we've been, trying to address really all the way up to this point. We're not looking to argue or relitigate any of the criteria. We just think that they need to be holistically revisited because of the time frame gap in the change in all the regulations.
Any other questions, Commissioner? None? So that concludes our discussion on Snow Club Highlands analysis for this application. We'll now consider the merits of the application itself. Start working through the criterion. So under each criterion, we're going to talk about again, we're going to hit on 8 aesthetics, 9L, settlement patterns, and hopefully we'll briefly confirm that there's no issues with 5. So the first, I'll ask the applicant to present their case under the criterion. Since we don't have anybody that requesting party status, we won't need to address that. And the commissioners in this section, we'll all ask questions as we see fit. So we can get started with criterion 8. Criterion 8 provides that before granting a permit, the commission must find the proposed project will not have an undue adverse effect on the scenic or natural beauty of the area, aesthetics, historical sites, or rare or irreplaceable natural areas. 10 ESA 6086A8. While the burden of proof under criterion 8 is on those who oppose the project, 10 BSA 6088B, an applicant for the permit must provide sufficient information for the commission to make affirmative findings. And that's where the Queechy analysis comes in. The commission relies on a 2-part test to determine whether a project satisfies criterion 8. The first is to determine whether the project will have an adverse effect on your criterion 8. The commission looks to whether a proposed project will be in harmony with its surroundings, or in other words, will fit within the context in which it's located. In making this evaluation, the commission examines a number of specific factors, including the nature of the project surrounding, the compatibility of the project's design with those surroundings, the suitability of the project's context, project context of the colors and materials selected for the project, the location from which the project can be viewed, and the potential impacts of the project on open spaces. So in this similarly, we've got a number of factors that we want to work through and get responses related to the criterion, and ultimately, the 3 key areas that we're digging into is the landscaping, signage, and lighting. So the first one is the nature of the project surrounding, second, compatibility of the project's design with surroundings, the suitability of the project's context for colors and materials selected for the project, the location for which the project can be viewed, the potential impact of the project on open spaces. I guess we could get started with those first handful of factors, and then move on to the second piece.
Okay. Sure. So, talking about the nature of the project surroundings, I think we, first have to recognize that it's an existing auto dealership. And so there's existing improvements on the site, and we try to work, around and with those improvements on the layout scale. And so when you take a look at the nature of the projects in itself, I guess let's look at itself first. It's a site in disrepair. The building has to be revisited, reconstructed essentially. And so there's certain things that result from that. But when we look at the project, and certainly the, revised landscaping plan, we are positioning the building further away from the highway. And so generally in the same spot. I mean, it's shifting back, I think, 5 feet or so. So I don't want to overstate the adjustment, but it is a shift away from, the highway. Same, general location. So and we're talking about a building that's only, I believe, 2,300 square feet in size larger, and that grows further away from the road. The geometry of the building is very similar along its front facade. And so from somebody who's passing by, we're not creating something that's going to jump out at them. The surrounding area, it's there's not a lot of development in this section, but you don't have to go far away to get to, developed areas. So I don't think that it will change the way people feel as they drive along Route 7, primarily because of our newest mitigation proposal, where we have, those 7 islands, the mature landscaping. So if it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would hand out maybe the landscaping plan and just talk about that a little bit. Sorry, I should have brought larger copies. So if you take a look at, and a fair amount of these bullets are kind of overlap here, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the, nature of the project surrounding. So you have, as you're coming from, the north and traveling south, it's a 14.
I'm gonna recommend we take another 3-minute break, so I can pick up the camera again. Unfortunately, that's the best.
right, we're ready to go.
Good to continue?
Thank you.
So touching back on the nature of the project surroundings. So you have obviously the intersection of 103 and Route 7 here, Squier Road. There's, a fair amount of landscaping along the front of the property that's going to be maintained. Our new plan will be to transplant the mature trees along the front of the property, so those will be maintained along the front of the property. And so I think that the reality is when you're driving by, it's going to have a similar feel. You're going to have a much nicer building and you're going to have a much more updated property, but it is going to, in our opinion, biased opinion, it's going to have a much nicer look. Now, I don't think, obviously this is a highway, it's supposed to speed limit 55 miles an hour. I can't imagine that this is going to have a negative impact on the surrounding design. The other thing that I want to point out is we had this, with this design, updated design, we reduced the size of the gravel parking area as well. We took 10 spaces away from that. And we took the 10 spaces adjacent to the Route 7 corridor. So we have additional separation from the Route 7 corridor there. We added additional trees in that area. And I just want to state, we submitted as part of this project Exhibit 45, which shows and talks about existing landscaping, permitted landscaping, and, proposed landscaping. And currently along the front of the project, we have, we're maintaining, those trees, but we're actually adding a lot of trees and vegetation in areas along, the corridor along the front. In fact, in total, this project will be adding 68 trees to the site and about 127 shrubs. So it's a pretty significant landscaping plan. We have worked with, Quinn's guidance again on focusing on location of landscaping. And so we have from our original plans, the plan that you have now in front of you, this plan, we've located a lot more of those trees along the Route 7 corridor. And the biggest improvement is obviously maintaining or transplanting rather, the 15-inch oak, 12-inch maple, 12-inch oak, and the 8-inch oak, the other another 15-inch oak tree. I mean, so that's a substantial effort and investment in addressing, I think the critical mitigation component would be. So we think that, the project, that's the nature of the surroundings, but also speaking to the compatibility of the project design with those surroundings. They kind of morph into that one as well. But we do think that the design that we're now presenting would be compatible and would be improved. I think I addressed the second bullet, Mr. Chairman, kind of in that. Do you mind if I move to the third one? Absolutely. Okay, the suitability of the project's context and the colors and materials selected. Again, we're proposing the Subaru gray with the accent cowl and the slate. We feel like that's not an obnoxious color, and it's not a color of concern. It is a change, a requested change, admittedly, but so we think that it is a suitable color, and we hope the commission will find the location from which the project can be viewed. Well, interestingly enough, as you travel along the highway in either direction, north and south, it's like the landscaping layers on it, right? So if we have all of these islands and we have, the existing woodland area here, proposed landscaping here, maintaining the vegetation in this corner here, and then there's the transmission line, which still has the underlying vegetation, and then on the north side of that, there's vegetation. everything will kind of layer on itself as you travel along the highway. And so there's not going to be this vast open area where it just is like a shocking, hey, there's something there. I think this design really fits in well in prevents the project from having, a solid, impactful, view along the border. And then the potential impact of the project on open space. Well, interestingly enough, this project is pretty consolidated in its footprint. We have a 14.1 acre site. We're developing and impacting roughly 5, acres of the project, in ballpark number. But the good portion of the site, along, the west area and certainly along the north, there's an area on the other side of the transmission line too, is going to remain undisturbed. There's a wetland buffer area now that we actually improved with this project. And so we pulled a lot of the improvements out of the wetland buffer area, making it more compliant. On the, I haven't talked a lot about the west side of the site because it's been so much discussed on the Route 7 side, but this west side of the site, which is adjacent to that Class 2 wetland, we're, proposing to curb that to capture all the stormwater routed over to this basin here, the gravel wetland. But we're also proposing, a lot of landscaping along that area to kind of re-establish that, wetland buffer area. And so I think the project overall is sensitive to open space, and there's a lot of open space preservation that would result from this project.
So the next piece, if the commission concludes that the project does have that.
If I could just move on to the second part, it seems to me that we're just a lot on the landscaping and there's also the lighting and timing. I think you guys have heard of some of that, but maybe I have to take it in context with the factors.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So, touching on the lighting, again, we have a modified lighting design that we believe meets and exceeds the Chittenden County lighting standard, where we don't have, light pollution. We meet the lighting levels that are recommended. We have the appropriate uniformity. And so just speaking to some of the improvements, so if you take a look at our old design, I mean, it's just, it's hard to articulate sometimes the improvement, but the front row of our old design averaged 8.3 foot candles. Can you tell us what exhibit the old design was that you're talking about? Yes, I can. Number 29. That would be 29. So that lighting design, the old design, had 8.3 foot candles along that front corridor. That's been reduced to 4.2. And, that's a significant reduction. I think the recommendation is being below 5, is what I recall from the standard. And then, other areas of the site have been reduced significantly too. So like there's kind of the sales area, we went from 4.2 to 2. The lower lot, we went from 2.4 to 1.7. The area along Squier Road, we went from 2.8 to 2. The glare rating went from 3.5 to 2, which is within the standard. And so very significant changes in the lighting design to meet what we understand to be, that standard. And so I do think that we have addressed that. And these are improved, they're definite. I mean, we didn't model the metal halide lights, but the lighting is there. When we talk about the layout, the site has lighting along this entire front corridor right now. We I think we added this light here, because we're wrapping around, but, you know, those lights are there, close, you know, fairly close to the right-of-way line and, you know, not of the technology or, you know, standards that you see, you know, today. So I think it would be a significant lighting improvement there. Certainly, the lights haven't been used in a long time. It's been a vacant site, but it's still a site that somebody could, you know, turn the lights on. From a sign standpoint, excuse me, before we'll pass the lights, so will it be the interior lights that you have, and they be lights can be on all night long, on interior and you know, the Stevens, some places they have no, we won't do it. Big park because we want to use the daylight. Right. Daylight with the controllable light back. When it leaves, the lights automatically go down to a certain because it's kind of off, they'll automatically go down. And the same with the exterior lights too. Whereas during operation, you'll have the lights all on. And after everyone goes home at night, there'll just be safety lights on. You'll be throwing all the lights on. You know, just safety lights on. Usually what we do is when we do and I go, well, we want to do this, if there's neighbors, we don't have any neighbors. So we're going to be doing the light fall on somebody, we'll shut down and take one down. So say you have 100 lights, but say 100 for the season map, we'll only have 33% off.
I had a quick question on that. So this is an environmental, you know, consideration, but I'm interested in experience from a security point of view. How important is nighttime lighting to securing?
Well, that's why we go, okay, to choose a rough number of 100. That's why we go down to 33%, just to see what we have to have on for safety and you know, deter any viewer.
And does that meet your
Yes,
experience and the standards around your other?
Yes, we go down 33%. That's what usually works.
And typically in other states, we'll make it brighter. The answer. So we, you know, these limits are lower than we usually use. So I was, you know, being cognizant and concerned about the fact that, you know, we want to make sure the foot counts are low enough to meet the standards. That's what we put it in night light circuit. That's what we did. And thank you. We have 2 gates, correct? So there will be a gated property, there will be cameras on the property. So that's how they,
And the reduction that you brought, the lights, will that take the requirement as far as the security camera?
Yep.
Feel comfortable with that lower level?
Some of the cameras have their own night light filter to you know, capture it when it happens. And like Tim stated, the gates will be locked up. They'll need to have all the lights on, you know, all the time. But obviously, in this time, one shut them down to save some money.
I guess the question Joe and I are trying to raise is this going to be a burden for your security to have your lighting low if you've laid it out?
I think it can work. Thank you, Russ. As it pertains to the signs, so again, I guess we technically look at these criteria. As I stated before, the existing sign is located here. We're putting the new pylon sign, meeting all design standards, our height, size, and such. And then we're asking to locate, you know, the emblem and the Subaru lettering on the building. Those meet the size requirements and everything, but there is the criteria that says no additional signage, you know, on the site. I would argue that the intent was no additional signage along the Route 7 corridor. With all the landscaping and everything, you know, this is really a corporate standard for the building. But I don't think it offers an impact or has a negative impact on, you know, the aesthetics of the 7 floor. The pylon sign will, you know, be a typical Subaru standard, but it's the size. When we started, we had a much bigger size, and that was an educational component with Quinn again saying that you're outside of the boundaries here, guys. So, but there must be something smaller that you can do, and we modified that and came back with a, you know, reduced size plan. That's why, you know, that
there's a revised exhibit that specifically addresses. And below that, correct. And so we meet all the standards, including, no higher than 12'6" of the adjacent highway grade. We fall under that. It's smaller than the existing sign. Ideally, we would like to have an internally lit, modestly internally lit sign. That's a kind of a corporate standard, but in the interest of being, flexible and willing to work with, concerns, we will entertain an externally lit sign. And that goes with the letter. Well, but we certainly feel as though that those designs are, compatible with the project design, and with the, the surroundings, because we're not adding we're actually reducing the size of the sign. And, I personally feel like an internally lit sign can be more modestly lit than sometimes the externally lit sign, but actually has more light. But that's my opinion. The locations from which it can be viewed would be, it's in the same spot. We will have additional, that landscaping along the front. So the sign will be just out in front of that, but not any different than how the existing sign is.
Quick question on internally lit. Is anyone on your team prepared to offer what's the benefit of an internally lit sign? Just in your experience, why are they favored?
Functionally, the sign itself is an internally lit LED sign. So it's kind of an industry standard. So we buy all our signs from Philadelphia Sign and Field. All the dealerships across the United States buy them from the same system. So that's how we buy our signs. In this particular case, if we need to light it from externally, we can do that, but internally, how they're always, and it's an LED light. It's a very low energy, it's very energy efficient light, and it honestly, over the years, it's maintained very well.
Are they easier to, do they hold up longer over time?
Alternatively, we would come up with a lighting design that would uplight this line, this line. So that itself wouldn't be aesthetically as pleasing as just because these signs are they're very dim. And they show up white, but they're very dim. It's not a very bright light. It's just
can't see them.
Well, it's just a, inside the letter itself, they have LED lights that aren't very bright.
We're aware of this paragraph about the past standards, but we're certainly open to the argument that internally lit may be better. And that's what I'm asking right now is tell us why they're better.
Well, I would say just from my experience, and I won't speak specifically for Subaru, but from my experience, the externally lit signs have a maintenance function that tends to be an issue, whether it's landscaping that causes an impact and now that's the light's not directed exactly how it should be, or, we're in New England, we don't get as much snow as we used to, but certainly the lights can be impacted by weather conditions. And where if you have an internally lit sign, the longevity of the sign itself, it lasts longer, and it's very low maintenance. So I think it's better from that standpoint, and it's more controlled lighting. Somebody's not going to go out and change a fixture or a light bulb, in an internally lit sign by accident, let's say. But I just think it's a more of a controlled environment.
We had a conversation with Quinn the other day talking about glare factor with lighting. We've dimmed down the overall sight lighting to where it also reduced the glare. I think when you see a sign that's lit by floodlights, that's what it'll be lit by, there's much more of a glare than an internally lit sign. I think it's a much calmer white light that you see as you're driving by than a sign that has floodlights on it. That's how externally lit signs are. And they create I think, a tremendous amount of glare versus the internally lit sign. I think it's a very calm white light.
All right, Tom, think about it. It's way more conducive to dark sky compliant, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense why you would want floodlights pointing up on all these other pictures. We're trying to intentionally cut them off and put them down.
None of us were there when they decided that the
No.
exterior was better, so that's why we're kind of trying to make a record
Yeah, when you
here.
do the exterior signs too, you got landscaping, you got the snow, you don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know, can control that, we can control the interior lit sign, a lot better.
You have a single component sign that is a sign with the lighting integral to everything. So you don't have to worry about, you don't have three things that you have to deal with. Two spotlights and a sign, sign maintaining, you have spotlights maintaining, that's compatible. And you can get, potentially you could get that glare for the internal of the sign. You don't have the bright spot in the light, you just have the internal light.
And the sign is made to function that way. And like I say, it's not gonna function as well. As you drive by, it's a much calmer light. As you're driving by, you see these dealerships at night with the light lit. It's a much calmer than some glare that you see from floodlights. And that's really the alternative. So we would much prefer, and we would ask for the, interior lit signs. We would ask for the permission to do it that way if that's possible. So we would prefer that. If it's a sticky point with the board, we'll do whatever you want us to do, but we would prefer to do anything this night.
Do the internally lit signs, as we talked about, the lights are dimmed in the evening. Are the signs dimmed as well?
Typically, they go off.
Or go off?
They go off. They would turn them loose. So at a certain time, they would shut off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Brad.
Good to move on to second part of the test.
I think so, Mr. Chair.
So again, if the commission concludes that the project has adverse effects under criteria 8, the commission moves to the second part of the test and evaluates whether the adverse effect is undue. So for the sake of the permit hearing and the fact that we're not making this decision today, go into the second part of the test and hear testimony to inform our decision. So there's three items within the second part, and those are: does the project violate clear written community standard and preserve the aesthetic or scenic beauty of the area? Does the project offend the sensibilities of the average person? Is it offensive or shocking because it's out of character with its surroundings, or significantly diminishes the scenic qualities of the area? Has the applicant failed to take generally available mitigating steps, which a reasonable person would take to improve the harmony of the project with its surroundings?
Sure. So speaking to the three components again, which would be the signage, the lighting, and the landscaping, I think, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Right. So with the lighting, I would say that we have designed the site so that there should be no shock or obnoxious feel. It's within standards. There's no light pollution. The light fixtures are adequate. And I would say even, the proposal that we would prefer with the internally lit signs and letters on the building would be modest as well. And so I don't anticipate, and I don't see how that the signs could violate, any clear written community standard intended. The sign is in the same spot. Currently, the existing sign is an externally lit sign, but we feel like it's a large externally lit sign. Our sign will be smaller, and we're hoping that it could be internally lit. We don't believe the sign would offend the sensibilities of the average person. It wouldn't be offensive or shocking. Again, we're dealing with an existing auto dealership and we're proposing an auto dealership. So it's a little unique because we're not a new development. So people are used to, something being there. I think what the reality from a sign standpoint is it's gonna be a different sign in the same location, slightly smaller. I don't even really consider, I shouldn't say it that way. I don't really think the building sign really plays a role here because it's not even out where somebody would, see it right off. But just speaking to, we don't think that would be obnoxious, certainly for the record. It's due to its position off the highway and the landscaping mitigation that we're proposing. Again, they're very modestly lit sign. And we do believe that we have taken reasonable steps for mitigation. And I hope the commission considers it more than reasonable. Quite honestly, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, 25 plus years, and I very rarely come across an applicant that's willing to transplant, 18-inch diameter trees, and to incorporate that into a design. So I do think there's significant mitigation here, and that really will touch on the sign and the landscaping aesthetic, but, and so I touched on the lighting and the sign. And so next is the landscaping. I think that was a good transition. With the landscaping, we're proposing more landscaping than what the original permit encompassed. We're proposing to maintain those mature trees along the highway. We will transplant them. We're proposing a lot of additional landscaping, along the right of way. So certainly we don't think we're, going to violate the clear written community standard. The goal here is really to, maintain and improve, a visual standard. I don't think the project will offend, the sensibilities of the average person. I don't think it's offensive or shocking. Again, as you travel along Route 7, you'll have the mature landscaping there. It'll look like it's been there a while. It's going to be a new site behind mature, some mature landscaping. I think that's going to be a great visual, quite honestly. And I think the colors that we're proposing are, even though it changed from brown to gray, still, certainly not an obnoxious color or something that should jump out, at anybody. So I don't believe that is an issue. And again, the last bullet, I think we have taken, available mitigating steps. Thankfully, we were given enough clues along the way, and hopefully enough of them to meet the expectations of the commission. But we think that, our proposal is reasonable, and we're definitely trying to make a project that's in harmony, with the surroundings.
Great. Any questions on that one, guys? Okay, that concludes our evaluation of criterion 8. We can move forward on the criterion 9 unless one minute or anything else you'd like us to talk about.
So criterion 9L is settlement patterns, promote Vermont historical settlement patterns, compact villages, urban centers separated by rural countryside.
A permit will be granted for the development or subdivision outside of an existing settlement pattern when it is demonstrated by the applicant that, in addition to all other applicable criteria for development or subdivision, will make efficient use of land, energy, roads, utilities, and other supporting infrastructure, and will not contribute to a pattern of strip development along public highways, or if the development or subdivision will be confined to an area that already constitutes strip development, will incorporate infills and defined in 24 VSA 2791. And is designed to reasonably minimize the characteristics listed in the definition of strip development under subdivision 600136 of this Title 10 VSA 6086 A9L. The definition of strip development is found at 10 VSA 600136. Strip development means linear commercial development along a public highway that includes 3 or more of the following characteristics: broad road frontage, predominance of single-story buildings, limited reliance on shared highway access, lack of connection to any existing settlement except by highway, lack of connection to surrounding land uses except by highway, lack of coordination with surrounding land uses, and limited access for pedestrians. So we'd like to have the applicant speak to some of the characteristics described, and ultimately there is 4 of the characteristics defined that need to be considered as it relates to impact under 9L. And those are 1, 2, 4, and 7, broad road frontage, predominance of single-story buildings, lack of connection to any existing settlement except by highway, and limited access for pedestrians. So if you would, take us through kind of your view on those items and how they relate.
Sure. So I think, in general, the criterion 9L, as it pertains to strip development, was a topic that we didn't really understand in how it was going to be applied with this project. Because the original permit doesn't talk about strip development, and we didn't ask great questions initially, and kind of in the end, we were told, well, that's because it wasn't restricted 4 years. So similar to other regulations that have changed, the commission and A&R regulations have changed too. And so what we have here is existing strip development, and we have us coming in and trying to make changes and improvements to existing strip development. So I think it's important for us to recognize that the application initially submitted didn't recognize that, and that's why. We didn't really understand how we fell into it if it wasn't part of that original permit. And, interestingly enough, depending on how you look at some of these items, they're not an exact fit. I mean, some of them are, but, and so the real question, I think, is, are we contributing, to strip development, or are we trying to maintain mitigating components to avoid and to not, contribute to that? And we think we are trying to mitigate, and, while still addressing a lot of other regulations in criteria along the way. This item is a large, is largely part of the reason why we, are finding embracing and proposing. And why we've incorporated this Seven Island out in front of the project, and, have really shifted landscaping, more toward the part of the project. The reality is, auto dealerships don't want landscaping out in front of their use. It's a competing element. But we've acknowledged that with this site and the conditions and the permit conditions and, this strip development, regulation, we have. And so we've embraced it, and we've tried to incorporate that, into the project. We've done that by reducing the parking along the front of the project, again, incorporating those islands. We've reduced the parking in the gravel, parking area, added more trees over there. But just to kind of walk down through these, I guess, the bullet items, the appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
So you want to go address 1, 2.7?
So it's 1 and 2 are the first 2 bullet items.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't need to hit all.
Okay. Thank you. So certainly, broad road frontage. The project takes access from Squier Road, which we think is a hazard. We don't have access off the highway. There's no focal point off the highway. But, we do have a lot of frontage along, Route 7. And so what we're trying to do is to address that broad road frontage by incorporating, the landscaping element. So the original permit talks about a lot of landscaping and maintaining the trees and not cutting the trees along the front of the property. We can say with this permit that we're not cutting those trees, we're actually transplanting. So part of that rationale was we are, in our mind, somewhat compatible with the intent of that permit, which is to maintain and establish, mature vegetation. So if we can transplant those trees and locate them appropriately along that linear frontage, hopefully we're mitigating for that broad road frontage. So we've accepted that, and we're trying to mitigate that through, not just the 7 islands, but also, we're doing additional landscaping in the southeastern corner. We're doing landscaping on this northeastern section. We're doing landscaping adjacent to the transmission lines, we're out in front of where our stormwater management area is, and certainly out in front of the, that additional parking area here. There is stormwater that runs along this entire front, so we have that disturbance for stormwater. It's not specifically, for constructing, parking per se. We just want everybody to understand that, we're trying to address a number of topics, but mitigate it with, landscaping throughout. So again, I think it was 68 additional trees, 127 shrubs, that we're proposing, with the mitigation of the project. Number 2, I believe, was the predominance of single-story buildings. I mean, we have single-story buildings out there now. And so we're reconstructing the site. This building is slightly taller than the existing building. So there is some variation in elevation. There'll be some contrast between the buildings and such, but it's an existing site now. We're building a little bit further back from the highway, so, could be considered kind of a mitigating component. And we're expanding furthest from the highway with that additional square foot. It's a 2-story building. Yeah, correct.
What is contained on the second floor? So I have a question for you. You're not the only ones who are trying to, figure out the application of 9L to an existing auto dealership. But I think we all understand the idea, which is what strip development typically looks like. And my question to the engineer and even to the applicant, have you seen something like this before where you were being accused as an auto dealership of being contributing to strip development of any kind? You're seeing that concept before?
I haven't been part of that concept.
All right, thank you.
Anything else on the predominance of,
So is it fair for us to say, based on the architect's statement, that if we're going to, one of the mitigating factors to the predominance of single-story buildings at the existing site is that the new structure will not be single-story?
That's correct. Yep. I believe 4 was the lack of connection to any equestrian settlement set by highway. We take access from Squier Road, so we technically don't take access directly from the highway, and so I'm a little confused by this.
Yeah, so the description of lack of connection to any existing settlement by highway is
there is no sidewalk or other pedestrian multi-use infrastructure to connect the development to existing settlements and development displays these characters. Ultimately, you've got road and property. And no connect other.
So there's no adjacent sidewalks, there's no pedestrian activity, there's nothing for us to, connect to, right? So I don't think it's overly.
Not gonna put a sidewalk in and go out before.
And it's good on Clarendon next to the golf course, and after the golf course is.
Well, you could put a golf cart.
Thanks to do that. Tell me how, what?
So, I will just make one comment here. I'm focusing on section, Roman Roman 2, which is an existing subdivision, that, already contributes to strip development because you've got at least 4 of these factors. So we're asking for evidence today that would reasonably minimize the characteristics, and I'm not sure we're expecting evidence on reasonably minimizing all of them, just some of them. Just some of them do appear to be unlikely to be. In other words, I don't think you have to meet some reasonable minimization of every single characteristic. I believe so.
I find that very like that, before it's very difficult. There is nothing to. Other than the 5 miles.
Yeah, no, I'll take definitely not here.
But since we're mitigating that, there's some of the factors that, that's what our goal would be.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that we're talking about, as far as the landscape plan, along Route 7, so it doesn't seem like it's a broad frontage, instead it seems like it's a disjointed frontage with the landscape.
What can you do reasonably?
Yeah, we didn't get a memo from the legislature on this, so we're
working together.
filtering our thoughts to you that some effort here to tell us how you're expecting to reasonably minimize some of the characteristics is what we're looking for.
But I think the good part about us is we don't access directly onto the highway.
Right.
The broad frontage we talked about, the single-story building, it is a 2-story building. The connection to the coordination of the surrounding land uses, there's nothing else around us except for a golf course and dog daycare. We can do a dog path with the dog daycare. Other than that, we're fairly limited in what we do.
The next one is
Limited accessibility for pedestrians.
Pedestrians.
Similar.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same one. There's no sidewalks or no, nothing to connect to currently. And certainly if there was, we would have incorporated that in, with the project.
We can put in a bike rack for bigger than
Yeah. Any other questions related to 9L?
Just before we move on, again, not expecting anything here, but just to confirm we have everything that you want to present on. Was there any minimization you had under 5 or 6, which is lack of connection to surrounding land uses except by highway, or lack of coordination with surrounding land uses? Again, just want to make sure we're not jumping over anything in case you did have anything at those points.
Well, I would say, certainly we are it's an existing automotive, dealership right now. And the lack of connection to surrounding land uses except by highway, there's nothing really for us to connect to. Uniquely, we have a jurisdictional wetland that's quite large, traverses the western side and actually goes up to the transition line higher than the highway. And that is quite wide in its current configuration. So it would be a real tough permit to have any kind of coordination or connectivity if somebody even, wanted to. So that doesn't exist now, and I don't think it could physically exist with the features of the land. And sort of the same thing would apply to the lack of, any lack of coordination with surrounding uses. There's not really an ability to connect. We're trying to prevent the sewage connection first right now and capture that onto our site. It would be more appropriate there, but, I don't think there's any coordination to be done because of the kind of the limitations, the natural limitations of the property.
And when it says connection to existing settlement by highway, is that also roadways and highways, or do they mean highways like Route 7? The Squier Road is obviously a road, not a highway.
I think it's any highway, road.
Because it's connection to a settlement, there is a road that goes to obviously downtown Clarendon. But it says existing settlement except by highway. So in other words, I'm envisioning that if you're driving down Route 7, if we had a driveway off of Route 7, that's what they're talking about. We don't have that, we go over the road.
Yeah, again, so this is the one where I think the, bullet point, if you will, like the headline doesn't map on super well because it's about having sidewalks or other pedestrian multi-use infrastructure that connect the property to other places, so.
Okay.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, no,
There are roads that aren't highways.
Right, exactly. So the settlement, you get to a road, a side road, you get this project, but the limited accessibility of pedestrians, I understand that, but it seems to me like it's talking about something that only accesses off the highway, and you only access it to right off Route 7. Hard to go through a sandwich, you get 7.
So yeah, that's the.
The same trouble with the words they use. They could have just said, if you have to drive to it, generally,
Exactly.
There's no sidewalk. That's what they meant. It was for villages and rural. So without pedestrian access, they're not in the, but, didn't tell us what they meant by highway.
But we're not changing that. Right. I think that's really the key component of this project. We're not introducing the use. We're addressing the criteria for the rule change, but the use is there. We're certainly, in our opinion, not propagating or making that.
Good on that, Good. So we will move on to high transportation. So criterion 5 provides that before granting a permit, the board or this commission shall find that subdivision developed and not causing reasonable concession on conditions affecting highways, waterways, railways, airports, airways, and any other means of transportation existing at the 10 DSA 608685. So V-Trans entry prepared states upon review of the information submitted, V-Trans policy, planning, leases, bureau, development review, and permit service section has noticed that the site plan includes installation of illuminated flagpole within the state right of way. This item is not permitted within the right of way and needs to be removed unless their site plans are updated correct. That's earlier. Moving flagpole from the project.
Correct. And we have communicated that back. We will gladly revise this.
the last piece is, recess of the hearing. Thank you for everybody who participated, the applicant, all of you that joined today. The commission will consider all the evidence and testimony presented today. Next, the commission will issue a hearing recess order, which keeps the record open for a time. Typically, a hearing recess order asks the applicant and sometimes other parties to submit supplemental information in response to questions that were raised today. It allows parties an opportunity to respond to those supplemental findings. Once the process is complete, the commission will consider the record to be final. Once we have all the supplemental information we need, we deliberate and issue our decision. There's no further comments. We can adjourn the hearing. Before I do,
Just wanted to thank the applicant and the supporting experts for your commitment to not just the project, but to the process. And it's investment. And so thank you for your investment in the process.
Thanks for beating me to that, Tom. Yeah, professional, yeah, we have a very professional, we do appreciate what the thought. And do these kind of developments, other states don't have this kind of risk. Vermont. Thank you very much.
Our Subaru New England, obviously Act 250 is a big mountain to climb, but luckily we had Quinn to help us along the way. So she really has been a guiding light in the Act 250 process. So thank you to her.
I'd like to thank the three board members. I mean, you guys give up your time. I don't know if you get paid.
wait, we're not getting paid? What? We could submit mileage.
I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Second that.
All right, hearing no other comments, this hearing is now in recess. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. You have a time frame, you said?
What's that?
Is there a time frame for discussion?
It varies, but I took, holiday on Monday, so, I would say, looking at you guys by the end of next week, I think we can finalize the hearing recess order. And, provide a pretty quick turnaround time on that. If you guys need to make mention, we know exact time. But, that's great. You know, so the hearing recess order will say additional things that are needed, you guys reference a lot of updated plans, that's for the next day. So by the end of next week, you can, expect to hear from that, and then it'll go from there.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks so much.
Thank you.